get this set here. Good morning. It's good to see everybody here today. We have some visitors from the Cook. So glad you joined with us today. We appreciate your encouragement you've given to us, and we hope we're able to encourage you today. That's what we do. We're supposed to anyway. We're going to be looking at our last lesson today in our series about discipling. And what I want to discuss today is the topic or the title of the lesson being Discipling as a Lifestyle. Because really that's what it is. And this is based off a passage, if you want to turn your Bibles to 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2. This is the passage that this lesson stems from. It says here, let's begin in verse 1. You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. Amen. And the things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, these entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. There's a few things which this passage is sharing with us, and I'll touch upon those here before we get into the rest of what we're going to discuss today. But this text is a testimony that can only be described as a ministry of multiplication. I mean, that's what it is. We each one teach one. You've heard that phrase, and it just continues. Elijah did this for Elisha. John did this for his disciples. Jesus and the 12 that he taught. Paul to Timothy, and Timothy to the faithful. That's what this passage says. And these faithful then to others. That's what he says. Entrust these to faithful men who will be able to continue this process with others. So in our text, though, it says, the things which you have heard. The things that Paul is referring to are all of the teachings that he has given to Timothy up to this point. For us, these are the things which we have heard from Genesis to maps. All of that stuff. And there's all kinds of stories. And it depends on what situation with whom we are at any given time. I have a story from this place I could go. We look at different things going on in the world. The next two sermons that we're going to be talking about, next week it's going to be, the title of the lesson is Independence Day. The week after that is answering the question, or anyway, it's what is a woman? ? The definitive answer. That's going to be the sermons for the next 2 weeks. And the reason for that second sermon, actually the reason for the next one is because of the holiday. I'm tying the lesson into, July 4th. The following one after that is because of what June 1st is supposed to represent among many in the world, and the problem that so many have with trying to define a woman. So I think that God has the answer, and that's the point. Wherever we are, with whomever we are having a discussion, Scripture has an appropriate and relevant message to share with people. The things. When Paul says this here, he says, in the presence of many witnesses. This is very important because as Luke said at the beginning of his gospel, let me go back over here to Luke chapter 1 because of its relevancy here. Inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile account of the things among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word have handed them down to us, it seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in consecutive order, most excellent Theophilus. And so Luke, writing in the way that he did, he's letting Theophilus know, if there was anything that I share with you that you question, you can investigate it yourself to know that what I'm sharing with you has been tested to be true. So when Paul says this to Timothy, the things which you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, the things which Paul shared can be verified to be true. We need to know this as we are discussing our topic of being disciples and discipling others as a lifestyle. There's three reasons really why we want to be involved in this. And the first one has to do with the brevity of life here on this planet, right? We only have this much time. James chapter 4, the last part of verse 14, you're just a vapor that appears for a little while, then vanishes away. We only have so much time. You know, parents will do this. Their kids get older and they see their kids going through whatever difficulty they're being faced with, and you have had this goal for them their whole life. They grow up and they're going on a different path, and you think, how many parents have done this? And if you haven't done this yet, you will. What could I have taught them differently that would have caused them to make a different decision now? Right? We do that. We only have so much time. We need to make the best of those moments. The second reason why we want to make this a lifestyle, it's just a sense of stewardship. That's what Paul did for Timothy. He told Timothy, entrust these things to others who then will be able to teach others. We have that stewardship. If you're taking notes, take a peek at Job chapter 2, verse 4. What did Satan tell Job there? See, a man will give all that he has for his life. Right? When it comes right down to it, there are certain things that I will give up for the sake of priorities. And that involves that stewardship that we have. Genesis 3:19, by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. And tying that together with what Daniel said in chapter 12, verse 2, many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. Our bodies will turn to dust, but there's something of far greater value within the life of each individual, and that is our soul. Our soul has one of two destinations when our body turns to dust. It's either going to be to perdition or it's going to be to paradise. And it's a choice that we all need to make today while we're here on earth. And that's why being disciples, discipling others, is so very, very important. And lastly, maybe repeat this to yourself, okay? You can even do it out loud if you want. I want my life to count for something. I don't want to have to, I can't, it's a vague quote that I was reading. But there's an author who wrote this book, and when the author was speaking about a particular character in the book, the author said, it was as if they never lived. Right? I want my tombstone to read, my days counted for something important. And so we need to be able to do that. Psalm 71 verse 18, and even when I am old and gray, O God, do not forsake me until I declare thy strength to this generation, thy power to all who are to come. And then the first part of Psalm 92 verse 14, they will still yet yield fruit in their old age. The passage implying they were doing that while they were young as well. The whole life counting for something. So, although we talked a little bit about the cost involved in discipling as a lifestyle, I want us to look at some specific areas. We're going to talk about the cost, and then we're going to look at some misperceptions there. But there is a cost in the quantity of time that we spend in discipling. The psalmist says to number our days, chapter 90, verse 12. And as Christians, we must understand that our time is not our own. So we really do need to make the most of it, right? We really do. There's a cost there. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12, it shares with us that there is a cost in recognition. In our class this morning, we were talking about Jesus from Philippians chapter 2, verse 7, where it says that he emptied himself, taking on the form of a bondservant, becoming in the likeness of man. And so he got rid of that God recognition and became human, like we all here are. We're all human. Jesus was when he was here on earth. He got rid of that image for a brief time. If we're stuck on who we are as an image, it's really going to prevent us from being as effective as we need to be, as we could be. And so there is a cost there. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, look at verses 11 and 12. It says, to make it your ambition to lead a quiet life and attend to your own business and work with your hands just as we commanded you, so that you may behave properly toward outsiders and not be in any need. We are an example to those around us, whether we realize it or not. It's good that we make the best example of our lives as we can, right? We're wanting our lives to count for something. People should not be pointing fingers and saying, that guy, that gal, look what they do, and they call themselves a Christian, right? And so we need to make sure that we move away from a worldly recognition and fully grasp better what that godly image should be. John chapter 13 lets us know that there is also a cost when it comes to the conveniences of life. Convenience. Sherry bought me a deal that I can hook up to the hose and wash the car. She bought that for me last year. I've used it once. It's so much more convenient. You just pull up to that box with all the water and pull in there, and it squirts it, and at the other end it dries it off. And by the way, the car wash across from Pizza Hut today is free. I don't know if they're going to be doing that all day, but I went there because of convenience. to wash the Buick because it's not seen a car wash in a while, and they took care of it for me because their credit card machine ain't working. So it was convenience with a blessing. Anyhow, we like convenience, but we need to understand that being a disciple and discipling others, there is a cost in convenience. Because sometimes, we need to realize that as Christians, we are on call 24/7, right? People will call at some inconvenient times, needing a question answered, needing a problem taken care of. And it's really not something we can say, well, I don't really have time right now. What is that? How does that sound in the ears of somebody who has just looked to you for some help? John 13, verse 16. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, neither is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him. Think of the imagery that this passage is sharing to us. Slaves don't really have time off. They really don't. They get rest when they're able. And it's not always convenient. I think I've shared with you this story. When I was in the Marine Corps, as a mechanic on personnel carriers, there are 3 benches in there, one each side, one in the center, and they're only about 10 inches wide. I learned to be able to strap my arm on one of the benches on the side so that I wouldn't roll off, and sleep as that thing is, going through the trails, because that was where I needed to get sleep. Can't work on the vehicle because it's moving. I have to be with the vehicle in case it breaks down. So, yeah, you'll learn to do those things. And so we need to understand when it comes to discipling, there's a cost. This kind of leads into the second one, which comes from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, because we also need to understand that there is a cost when it comes to suffering. We're going to suffer. It may be just shared tears with somebody. We get that call late in the evening from somebody who is really having a hard time because you just found out their mom or their dad has cancer and it's in stage 4. And they need some consoling, right? They're suffering. They don't know that when they called you, you just put to bed a kid that has been sick all day long and finally was able to get some sleep. The ringing phone has just woke that child again. That's what we deal with all the time. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, look at verse 15. It says here, if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I'm not a part of the body, it's not for this reason any less a part of the body. We know the illustration here, don't we? You can't separate us one from another. We're here for each other. We are here for that person who has just been added to the body and still trying to figure all this foot, eye, ear, hand stuff, trying to figure all that out. Look at chapter 13, verses 7 through 9. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they'll be done away. If there's tongues, they'll cease. If there's knowledge, they'll be done away. For we know in part, we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. You know that all this stuff is in part. I know it's talking more about the Word, being perfect, and we only had pieces of it. Now we got the whole thing. But the point here is, this world is not something we were intended for, and there are costs involved if we ourselves are to get through it, and we ourselves are to help others to get through it, because that's what discipling is. There's also that vulnerability to exposure. The word that the world likes to use is transparency. We're familiar with that, right? 2 Timothy chapter 3. In 2 Timothy, and we'll take a peek at a passage in Isaiah. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 10 and 11. But you followed my teaching, conduct, purpose, faith, patience, love, perseverance, persecutions, and sufferings, such as happened to me at Antioch and Iconium and at Lystra, what persecutions I endured, and out of them all the Lord delivered me. Look at Isaiah chapter 45. Isaiah chapter 45, verses 9 and 10. Woe to the one who quarrels with his maker, an earthenware vessel among the vessels of earth. Will the clay say to the potter, what are you doing? Or the thing you are making say, he has no hands? Woe to him who says to a father, what are you begetting? Or to a woman, what are you giving birth? There are a lot of imperfections. And one of the things that we need to keep in mind here is that as we are discipling, here's a problem. But it's one that we have to deal with. I have weaknesses. You know that? Does anyone else not have weaknesses? When we're discipling others, what is the probability that we may transpose or expose our disciples to such weaknesses? Right? This is why another thing here, our weaknesses may be reproduced. When Samuel was given to Eli, to be raised, Eli was not a good parent. His kids did not turn out well. And you know what the problem was? Samuel learned his parenting skills from Eli. Samuel's own children were rejected by Israel. This is why cross-training, if we're working with this individual and, say one of us is working more with this individual, say me, for instance, if I'm working with this individual and I've been with them for a time where, they are seeing some of my own weaknesses, if anyone in here is also working with that individual, although you have weaknesses, they're probably going to be different from mine. In that respect, they will see your strengths wherein I am weak. And as we teach this individual, they will more likely pick up on those strengths, hopefully, than they will weaknesses. That's very important when it comes to discipling. So that we have those costs there. Let's look at some misconceptions here. The first misconception that, and I don't know if this is something you might think of. When I first thought of it, I thought, I don't really see that this could be a problem. Well, because maybe some do see it as a problem, we should talk about it, however briefly. But the first misconception is that an emphasis on discipleship neglects evangelism. And it really doesn't work that way when you think about it. Because as 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 2 says, Paul said to Timothy, entrust these things to faithful men who will entrust them to others. And so you really cannot separate evangelism from discipling. Because if we disciple an individual to such a degree that they then are now entrusting to others, what are we now doing? This person is stepping out on their own. They're growing in their maturity, and they're not using up so much of my time. And so now I can focus on others. Where do I get those others? Through evangelizing. Looking for others who need Jesus. So you really can't separate the two. The second misconception is that the congregation at large is neglected when one-on-one discipleship is emphasized. I don't see that as well. We're a small congregation, but we still have separate lives, right? I don't know who you're visiting with. I'll share with you. Okay, I'm going to do that right now. Sarah Grubb, she came here for some help, and she's not been back, but she has her own particular set of problems. I won't get into those right now because this is being filmed, and she may not want all that out there. But in visiting with her, I'm going to take a Bible to her today, because she doesn't have one of her own. That's pretty good stuff. Well, you may be visiting with folks, right? So we know that to pray for Sarah. There may be somebody you're dealing with that you're wanting prayers for. I don't know that we are neglecting each other, though. I don't see that. I will say this, though. If you feel you are being neglected, it's your responsibility to speak up. Say, hey, can we have coffee together? Can we sit down and visit? Can we share? Can we bond? Let's do that. Because if I don't know there's a problem, it's not something that I can work on, right? So that's very important there. John chapter 21. Let's look at a couple of verses there. John chapter 21, beginning in verse 15. So when they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, shepherd my sheep. And he said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, and this is for all of us, tend my sheep. We look out for each other. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12, it talks about all those different offices that were appointed, whether apostles or Bible class teachers, evangelists, whatever. Why? And that next verse is, for the edification of the body, the building up of the body. The third misconception is that you have to be a finished product to help others become a disciple. That is a misconception. Don't wait until you know the whole book to get out there and start sharing it. If you do that, you're never going to share. Yeah, it's too late. What you know, others don't. Give them that gift. Okay? That's all we can do. Apparently some have the misconception that clergymen can't do it because they're too busy. And I'll tell you right now, if a minister ever says that he is too busy to evangelize, find another minister. Right? Find another minister. Yeah. Some think that making disciples or, discipleship as a ministry is an unrealistic approach. And we talk about multiplication evangelism, and that's nothing more than that multiplying effect, right? Somebody said that if the multiplication ministry, discipling by multiplication, was perfect, the entire world, all 7 billion people, could be reached out to for Christ in 32 years. That's a whole lot. Have you ever seen, I saw this video years and years ago, and I thought, this is pretty cool, but they had this plexiglass box, and they had 50 mouse traps in there, each mouse trap holding 2 golf balls. And then they had this little hole, and the purpose of the video was to explain nuclear fusion. Okay? But it also explains evangelism by multiplication, because you take that one golf ball and you throw it down that tube, and in a split second, every mousetrap it set off. I mean, it was fast. Ping pong balls going everywhere. But that's what happens. If each of us go out and share Christ and work with that person. And I'm going to tell you, it's not something that's going to be instant. You have instant coffee. That's just, it can be good, but it's not good as brewed, right? It's not going to work with evangelism. It's not to say that it can't happen. We have the example of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, but in that case, this traveling individual, what was he doing while he was going down the road? He was reading. He was reading from the book of Isaiah. Philip jumped up there in the vehicle. Door was wide open. Jumped in the back of the chariot and said, "Hey, this is what's going on." And what did he do? "Look, here's water. What prevents me from being baptized?" You believe you can. So they did. That can happen. It can still happen today. But it's more likely going to happen the way that Christ spent 3 years of his life working with 12 individuals, and mostly with just 3. And so that's the example for us. We need to be willing to spend the time with a person, get to know them. That leads us into the last misconception, and that is that it will always succeed. Weak links will always be present. We can't let weak links stop the rest from being effective. Okay? So it's just something to keep in mind. Some reasons for a lack of success. Maybe there might be a compromise for social approval. I don't want to evangelize this person. Look at the kind of life they lead. Right? Jesus met with, what did the Pharisees say? He meets with tax gatherers and sinners. That's disgusting. That was what was in their mind. We can't let social approval prevent us from sharing Christ. Love of money, might take me away from my job. It might force me to forego a vacation. It might, whatever. Lack of wholeheartedness. Yeah, you can't jump into discipleship half-hearted. You really can't. Let's turn to Luke chapter 15. In Luke chapter 15, there are just a couple of passages that I want us to take a peek at as we close, because we are talking about a lifestyle here, right? In Luke 15, it starts out there, all the tax gatherers and sinners came to Jesus to listen to him. The Pharisees and scribes grumbled, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." But what did Jesus say? In verse 4, "What man among you, if he has 100 sheep and has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go after the one until he finds it?" That lost one is very, very important. Verse 8, "What woman, if she has 10 silver coins and loses one coin, does not light a lamp and sweep the house and search carefully until she finds it?" I told you about the penny, didn't I? I still do this to this day. I don't know why. I think all of them have been found. But in 1943, during the war, the U.S. Mint stopped making pennies out of copper because they needed the copper for the war effort. So they made them out of tin. And the 1943 copper penny, the last one, sold for $1.2 million. I think it was Lloyd's of London who sold it. And when I first heard about this as a teenager, it's when I started this habit. Didn't matter where I was. If I saw a penny on the ground, I was picking it up. I'm sweeping the house. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, I think all of them have been found. But we see the importance of that. There is a huge value in that lost one. Then we know that last story. Certain man had 2 sons. What happened to them, right? One went one way, one went the other way. But it says here at the end, verse 32, "We had to be merry and rejoice, for this brother of yours was dead and has begun to live, and was lost and has been found." That's the joy in discipling. That's where you will find how much your life matters to somebody else. There are stories of people who, just because of one interaction, changed the entire life of the individual they touched. They took the time and said, "Hey, I care." That's the lesson's yours. The lesson's yours. We know what Jesus came to do for us, right? He came to earth to free us from the condemnation of sin, because when a person sins, and all have sinned, Romans chapter 3 and Romans chapter 6, we've all sinned. That's got to be fixed, and the only way that's fixed is through Jesus. So if there is any way that we can be of an encouragement to you today, let us know, won't you, while we stand and sing.
When we walk with the Lord in
The light of His Word, what a glory He sheds on our way. While we do His good will, He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey.
Not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share, but for He doth richly repay. Not a grief nor a loss, not a frown nor a cost, but is blessed if we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, trust and obey. Then in fellowship sweet, we will sit at His feet, or we'll walk by His side in the way. What He says we will do, where He sends we will go. Never fear, only trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey.